Thank you. Thank you guys for taking interest in the important topic of human trafficking, which does affect our city. I just want to give a little bit of background. So again, as a journalist, this is something that I've covered deeply, investigated around the time of the Super Bowl coming to Houston. I did an investigation on human trafficking in Houston. And despite the often repeated claim that Houston is a hub for human trafficking, it's not entirely true. We do have a human trafficking problem, but the problem is sometimes exaggerated, just to be clear on that. And in fact, the problem is exaggerated around the Super Bowl. But the reality is we do have a deal. Some of you have heard of the Sweet 16 deal where certain strip clubs are allowed to pay the city essentially a ransom fee to continue operating. And those businesses often are hubs for human trafficking. Now there is a difference, I think, between genuine consensual voluntary sex workers, who I think deserve sex workers' rights, and that's a whole other discussion, and folks who have genuinely been human trafficked. So I think that's one thing, is we need to be able to distinguish between those things. The other thing is, for me, as far as actually having a plan, how do we address human trafficking, I'm the only candidate calling for beginning the end of the drug war in Houston, beginning with decriminalizing cannabis to stop wasting police resources, locking up black, brown, and low-income people for drug use, and instead using those resources to go after human trafficking. All right, thank you for bringing up education as well. First, I just want to say, Ms. Ben, for having read your book, thank you for the gift. And I see you're talking about bringing a perspective. I was one of the kids throwing desks and chairs in class, so I understand. I started getting arrested in junior high and high school, and that's what led me getting involved in drugs. So I understand the importance of getting the youth to be to know that there's other opportunities. And even through this campaign, we're being invited to speak, to share this story with some of the youth, and I'm really thankful for that. As far as HISD goes, I believe the question was related to juvenile getting in trouble as well as college readiness, right? So for me, there's a couple of things on that. Again, I think that we do need to have maybe some after-school type programs, some youth programs. I know for me it was just, I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't have anybody to express the problems and the trouble I was having in school. And then when you have teachers who are telling you, you might as well give up, well, that's what I did. I'll just sleep every day. I'll just act out, right? So we need to find a way to connect with youth who don't feel like they have a future, which I think is many of us. And as far as college readiness, there's two things. One thing is to accept the fact that college is not necessarily, necessary for everybody to succeed. There are folks who might want to go right into a trade or want to be an entrepreneur, which I highly encourage. So we need to be willing to meet the individual needs of each student and not assume that success means putting that kid in college, because that might not be the path for them. So we need to take a more individual approach on how we handle both youth getting in trouble as well as their future. Thank you. So, yes, I would like to work toward more transparency. I think that there are Houstonians who are concerned with the steps that ICE may be taking, whether that means coming to get folks who are undocumented, folks who might be wanted for various crimes. I think there absolutely should be more transparency between the people of Houston and the various departments that are involved in this, and especially the mayor's office. Now, just kind of on that topic generally, I do think that the people of Houston, the police, the authorities, should cooperate with ICE when there is, say, a wanted murder suspect, things of that sort. But I think we should also be hesitant to just right off the bat cooperate with ICE for everything that they come into our communities for. I'm hesitant to empower a federal agency to come into the city of Houston and to essentially have the right to take people away and things of that sort. But I do think it should be a case-by-case basis, and the way you do that is by being transparent and telling the people of Houston, this is what ICE is requesting. Obviously they have to be careful if they're looking for a victim. You don't say, hey, this is the person we're looking for, they're coming into your neighborhood. But there should be some transparency so that you don't turn around in your community and all of a sudden you see federal agents coming down the block and beating on neighbors' doors. I mean, that's a scary, traumatic thing for people, whether or not they are a criminal or not. Just, your kids, your children. I don't think those are the sort of things that we should become normal, that should become normalized and we should become used to. But transparency is key. Thank you. Excuse me. So, like folks have said, it might not necessarily be within the jurisdiction of the mayor, but I don't think that's what you want to hear. I don't think you want to hear somebody say, throw my hands up, well, there's nothing I can do as mayor. You want somebody who's going to advocate for you, who's going to lobby for you, whether or not it's necessarily in their jurisdiction. There are some things that we do care about that might not be the mayor's job, but you want to see us out there on the front lines fighting for you. You want to see us out there speaking for you and speaking for the things you care about. So I think it's better to do that than to throw your hands up and say, well, I can't do anything. A couple of points. First off, I want to echo what Ms. Smith said, is that, maybe we should question whether some of these crises are manufactured or not. And I have a proposition for that I think I'll put forward, whether or not it's within the mayor's duty, and it might be too radical for some of you, but I think that we should be weary of folks who advocate for red flag laws, both in Texas and elsewhere. If you haven't heard about this, red flag laws are becoming popular in other states. And this basically means if your neighbor, your ex-girlfriend, your ex-boyfriend calls the cops on you and says you posted something angry on Facebook, the cops can show up at your house, give you a mental health evaluation, take away your legally owned firearms or things you're in possession, maybe even put you in jail for a couple days while they evaluate you. I think that's very dangerous for us to give that power to the government. The only time that I think we should be willingly handing over our guns is if we disarm the police as well. And that's just being real, because as long as they have the guns, black and brown people are always going to be at risk. Maybe we're not ready to go that far yet, but I think we should be wise and think a little bit more deeply about this. Thank you. So, right off the bat, we need a civilian review board that actually has power, that can actually not necessarily subpoena, but can bring officers forward and question them when incidents do go wrong. Obviously, we need to initiate new training methods for the officers coming in, as well as the veterans. One of the things that I'm talking about, because for those who aren't aware, as mayor, we can either keep the current police chief, which I will not do, or we can assign a new police chief. I'm interested in a police chief who wants to bring in mental health officials to help train police officers, as well as maybe the cop with the gun doesn't need to be the first person on the scene when there's somebody dealing with a crisis. Maybe you need somebody who's actually trained in mental health and dealing with that, right? I've been on the streets out there as an activist and as a journalist. Does anybody know the name Dennis Tuttle or Regina Nicholas? These are two Houstonians that were killed by HPD just back in January. You may have heard about this. Yeah, those officers, apparently they didn't have this training we're talking about. They went in shooting, guns blazing. We're still trying to find out the truth of the matter. My point is here is we need a full audit of the entire police department. We need to look up all the police officers who have any record of violent history, violent crime, if they have reports, complaints against them, and we need to review, do we want these officers on the police force? My guess is maybe we don't. There are some officers who are already guilty of certain crimes and still on there. This doesn't mean all officers are bad. I have an aunt who served in HPD, but she left because of corruption. So the point is, if we're going to actually have transparency and de-escalation methods so that we don't have more people killed on the streets and harmed, we need to rethink police. Thank you guys for having this event and for the organizers for inviting all of the candidates. It's much appreciated. So I think the city of Houston is, as Mr. Baker said, is looking for someone that is not a politician. And there are people in this race who will promote themselves as not a politician, but you might not be a shark, but if you swim with the sharks, you might as well be one. So when it comes down to this race, we need to look outside of the candidates that you see on TV all the time, outside of the candidates that have millions of dollars to be in front of you, because that's what they're trying to do, is make sure when you go into the poll, you remember their name and you don't look elsewhere. But I recommend everybody check out all the 12 candidates that are running to get to know them. If you want to find more about me, again, my name is Derrick Broze, DerrickBroze.com. We've got flyers back there. I'm talking about 9 core issues as well as other issues that you will not hear from a single one of these candidates. They'll pay lip service when they're in front of certain audiences, but you got to look at, again, a track record. And I might not have served in office yet, but search my name, search Derrick Broze, and you'll find 10 years worth of activism, of journalism, as I said, being in places in Ferguson, standing up for Native communities, standing up for black and brown communities, being out there, being in city council for the last 10 years, going there every week, talking about issue after issue, confronting the mayors, confronting the previous mayors, confronting the police chief. I have no problem putting the people who are supposed to be in authorities in their place. And their place is supposed to be answering the questions to you, listening to your concerns. And that's the kind of person that I am. I'm not here to be a politician. I'm doing this one time. You put me in office, we'll transform this city over the next 4 years, and we'll make it something that actually looks like what the people of Houston want. We'll get rid of all the politicians and all the people who've been corrupting the system for so long and start over fresh. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to build. And again, I come from a background where I understand the criminal justice system. I understand the mass incarceration system. I understand drug addiction. I understand how to pull yourself up out of that and to make something better with your life. And if you want somebody with that experience, then I want you to look at DerrickBroze.com and find out more about me. Thank you very much.